Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is How to Rock Astrology. Today, this is a special episode for anybody who has been using Kala software created by Ernst Wilhelm. I'm going to be showing some discoveries that I've made. I like to call this some very Sagittarius, Moon, and Mercury secrets of a hand-drawn chart in a way that I enjoy doing charts. And what we're going to be talking about is the secrets of Kala's print function. This is what I'm planning on discussing today. So the big deal here is that Kala software has a great print function. Now, you don't have to take it as far as I do and actually print it out and then start making a hand-drawn chart like I do. You can just print and create printed versions of any chart that you would like to use in Kala. But there are also other great things with Kala's print function, wherein essentially you can turn Kala files from the Kala, you can print them into PDFs. When you make a batch print, they are printed into PDFs, which you can then check out using this Kala software. Now, I'm going to show you guys what this is going to look like once we do it. There are things in Kala that people might not realize, including one very important file. I consider it to be one of the great secrets that maybe Ernst talks about having them in his in some of his courses. I'm not entirely sure. But the great fun here is one of the special ones is we're going to use an example of Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart. And one of the great ones is when you look at the nature of the house lords in what the regular, well, I guess you would go to yogas and you'd check out the nature of house lords. And you can see them all here. Now, and you can print them from here as well. So we're going to talk about them because essentially this is something I'm going to do eventually, is talk about this great little secret. It shows the Scorpio Lagna, or whatever the Lagna of the chart is, and then it shows each planet as a house lord. In the case of, we have Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart, we have the Sun as the 10th lord. The Sun represents Scorpio natives' strong identification with the karmas they perform in life, because that is that which will make them. The Sun rules the 10th house, or at least the 10th sign from Scorpio. And so this whole paragraph discusses what it means to have the Sun as the 10th lord for Scorpio. Now, I'm eventually going to do classes just on these great pieces that Ernst has written and put into Kala software. But for now, that's just an example of some of the great things you can find through Kala software. In this video, I plan on showing you what you can do in order to make essentially a report. You know, the type of report that a lot of astrologers would make and give to somebody. Some people will just make these reports and give them out and say that'll be $40 or whatever, but I'm inclined to be the type of person who keeps it for myself and then actually gives the person an astrology session. But this would be an interesting thing to give a person, a client. Some clients I've given their report to, and they enjoy it and they appreciate it. It acts as a real ground for what you want to be conveying to a person, because it's all here when I'm doing a session. I have all of this information here. Now, different people are going to find different printable resources from Kala useful in different ways. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you guys what I think are the very great and important ones. And I'm just basically, this video is me showing what I do before I do anybody's astrology chart. And a key part of what I'd like to convey here is that what I mentioned, I'm a Sagittarius, not rising, I'm a Sagittarius moon with Mercury in Sagittarius as well. And I find that just like when you're taking notes in college, writing out the information, the scrawling of your pen on the paper gives you a neurological memory impression of the chart. And this is one of my favorite ways of expanding on a person's chart before I go and do their chart as an astrologer. And it looks something, again, like this. At least this is the front, how I convey my front page of my report. I take all of the important pieces of a chart and I put them on this front page as a sort of key code to zero in on any parts of a chart that I want to talk about when I do a reading for a client. I'm going to show you guys my process on that today, so I hope you guys enjoy. Now, the first thing we're going to do before we get into the writing, there's a little bit of technological stuff that I'd like to show you about how I get these PDFs in Kala, which end up showing, for example, the Rashi chart and the Navamsha that we might typically see. Kala actually gives a good little overview here. If you look close, you can see that the Atmakarka, the Admayakarka, the Jaimini Karkas are there. The Vimshotari Mahadashas at present are there. And as well, all the planets in their signs are there as well. So this is the first page that's sort of an overview. We can see we have other things like the Lajatadiya Vashtas that I print out. We've got Shadbala. We've got Shodasha Vargas. We've got the Vimshotari Dashas in a convenient page that just lists them all, as well as the Charnavamsha Dashas. And then there's these nature of the house lords that I mentioned. So this is all very useful things to have in your hand as a key code to the spine of the natal chart of the person that you're reading for. Now, different people are going to do this different ways. They're going to, some people might organize them in different ways. This is up to you, but I'm going to show you how to organize them. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Kala, and this is, of course, the chart of Jeffrey Wolf Green. I just recently did a mutual chart reading of Jeffrey Wolf Green on YouTube with my friend Timothy Halloran from RosalilaHealing.com. Feel free to check that out. So this is our natal chart. Now, the first thing I want to say is that Ernst has done a great job of basically making everything that you'd want to see in Kala in an astrology reading. It's all available through the print function, and I'm going to show that. But the first thing, I'm going to just start with that. Eventually, I do want to say that there is no print function for the Lajatadiya Vashta calculations as of the present moment. This is something that I'm going to show you guys how I do it in a quick and easy way. But for now, the first thing we're going to do is print a few things. So, first of all, keep in mind that when I say print, what we're actually doing here at first is essentially turning the guts of the chart into PDF files. Once you have them established in PDF files, we're essentially going to take them through some kind of software that can make them into one whole PDF file. Once it's one whole PDF file, you can print it through a home computer printer, and it will all be one useful double-sided hand, report that you can have in your hands, and you don't have to have it one on each page, right? And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So, here we are in Kala. What we do is we go to our print, and we set batch printing. What you're going to see is that this is the batch print that's going to be created once we go through and press print. Now we can see that you can choose what exactly you want in your reading. Now I'm just going to give you guys a quick idea of what I usually use. I use the Ashtaka charts. It's for when you're considering transits in Vedic astrology. The basic printout, which gives a little bit of everything and is pretty useful. I use Shadbala. I print the Shodasha Vargas. From there, I basically move to the yoga judgment I use because in Asheville Vedic Astrology, a very important lesson is the judgment of what we can see in yogas. This is the Ishta, Subha, Digbala function. And you guys will see it basically once I kind of print it. So I'll use the Rashi, the yoga judgment of the Rashi chart. Then we go up to dashas. I'll click dashas, right? And then the dashas are going to show any dasha that you decide to pick. And for me, the classic ones that we use, at least in Asheville Vedic Astrology, are the Vimshotari dashas, as well as the Charanavamsha dasha. I also, when we use these dashas, I basically just show the Antar dashas, the one full cycle of the, this basically is like the Mahadashas. And you could make it so that you show the individual sub-dashas, but I usually just generally go by the full cycle of the Mahadashas. From here we have these yogas, and it's very useful to see these yogas printed out. I oftentimes actually will have them as a reference, but I won't print them into my my 12-page report, just because I will generally see those yogas and understand them kind of in my head, instead of having to print like 20 pages, because these can be lengthy pages full of things, and you don't necessarily need to print it all and literally have a physical copy of them all. But I will turn them into PDFs, which is what this whole thing is doing. So once you have your PDFs all lined up that you want to create, you hit set. So then what we do is we go to print and we hit batch. And this is going to print all of the things that you just told Kala to print all at once. Let's hit batch. So what's going to happen is the computer is going to go blah, 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 and it's going to summon up, once my computer stops being slow, it's going to summon up what we have here as the printable Kala files. Now, before I just go ahead and print them all here, something that I've been doing, and this is essentially how I organize the charts, because essentially this is going to come out alphabetically. And I know that when I eventually print these, I want them to be in alphabetical order. I want them to be in a special order, not in alphabetical order. So I have this order memorized, and you guys are going to have to do this for yourselves in order to know what order you want your things to be in. So just to give you a quick little view of what I'm talking about here, I know that Kala is going to spit these things at me in a certain order. It starts with Ashtaka Vargas, and then the overview, then Shadbala, then Shodasha Vargas. Now you'll see I've got, you don't need to use the number 1 there, but I've got letters, and these letters are going to be what's going to end up being the chronology of my report. So I put F for Ashtaka Vargas, A for the overview, E for Shadbala, D for Shodasha Vargas, etc. Okay? So you're going to see what I mean. I'm just cluing you guys into this, okay? So you can see this. Now, when I come back here to Kala, we can see Ashtaka Varga that I've got in my key code is going to be F. So I hit save. Then the next one comes up. The next one is the overview of the chart. So I'm going to put an A in front of the name, Jeffrey Wolf Green, and I'm going to save. The next one that comes up is Shadbala, and I believe I have this as E. The next one is going to be Shodasha Varga, and I have the Shodasha Vargas as D. Essentially, this is going to be the space, again, that's taken in my report that I end up printing. Vimshotari is going to be G. And then next we have Charanavamsha, which is H. Then we have the judgment of the Rashi chart, of the yogas in the Rashi chart. I'm going to have this as my second, so I'm going to put B in front of it. And you can already see up here, folks, that we've got A, B, C is going to be it's going to be the Lajatati of Ashtas. Then we've got D, E, F, G, H. And then we've got essentially this is the core yogas, which is useful to be able to look at, but I'm not going to alphabetize it because it's not a part of the reports that I end up printing. Next, we have the nature of planetary lords, and this is a useful one, so I'm going to put this as I, which is essentially the last page in my report. Then what I'm essentially got next is I'm going to just press enter for all the parts of these other batch yogas. The delineations of the classical and modern yogas are here. We also have yogas for illness and accidents. We have yogas for marriage and sexuality. It's not part of my physical report. And this one, the nature of the house lords, as I said, is an important one. I thought we already did this just now. Oh, that was dashas and planets. Yes, so nature of house lords is going to be... Somehow I messed this up. This is going to be I, and my dashas and planets are supposed to be J, but that's okay. Spirituality, we can just hit enter as well. Now, hopefully this isn't too confusing for you guys, but I'm going to show you what exactly I've got going on here. When we go to the Jeff Wolf Green page, we see it all splayed out here. Now, one thing I want to quickly fix is that for dashas, I'm going to put this as J. Right, so now we have Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart delineated, A, B, C we're going to do, and then D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Oh, I can see that. The J. That's why I put the 1 in front of all these. So, what we should really be doing is putting 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. So, hopefully you guys can see the mistake I made here, and I'm sorry about that. Essentially, you want to, just in case anybody's actual name is going to interfere with the alphabetical order, I put a 1 in front of the names of these files so that the actual report that I'm going to print is not going to be mixed up by the alphabetized name of the person. For Jeffrey Wolf Green, I've got 1J. So here's my main report, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Now, each of these, when I print it, is going to, of course, bring up a PDF. For me, I use Microsoft Outlook or whatever to look at these PDFs. Now, this is, for example, the dashas. So, we know from Kala that we can look up the dasha screen, which should typically be here in the screen section. I guess he doesn't have everything here. And this is why it's useful to use this print function, because you won't be able to always see all these printable things on the screen of Kala. So this is just like, let's just digest this a little bit here. We've got Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart, okay? Now we know if the moon and Mars are in conjunction or aspect each other, a fortunate result will be experienced in the moon's dasha, while the dasha of Mars will be quite ordinary. Let's use a better example and say that we'll look at the Venus, this here. We can see that in Venus's dasha, the native will earn much wealth if Venus is in conjunction with or aspected by Mercury or Jupiter. This is written twice because we know that in Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart, Jupiter and Venus and Mercury are all conjunct in Scorpio. So what this is telling us is that during the Venus dasha, the native will earn much wealth if Venus is in conjunction with or aspected by Mercury or Jupiter. And of course, the native will become bereft of wealth in the dasha of Jupiter, and mixed results will be produced in the dasha of Buddha, which is Mercury. This is probably due to the fact that Venus starves Jupiter. The Rajasic nature of Venus will starve Jupiter. And mixed results are produced in the dasha of Mercury, which is interesting. So this is just like a little piece of data, and this is all of this whole page here. You know, the dasha of Venus associated with the fifth lord, for example. We know in Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart that Jupiter rules the second house as well as the fifth house. So that means that Venus is associated with the fifth lord Jupiter. And this is an association that brings good things. It's auspicious. So in a Venus dasha, we know that Jeffrey Wolf Green would be experiencing positive things from that fifth lord. But mind you, you've got to look at all the things that are happening here. So, for example, the dasha of, let's see, we can see that Venus is also with Mercury in this chart. And Mercury rules the 8th house from Scorpio, which ruled by Gemini. And Mercury also rules Virgo, which is the 11th house. So Mercury for a Scorpio can be an unstable sign. And it actually, especially because the 8th house lordship makes it unstable, and the 11th house makes it egotistical and egotistically unstable. They tend to act in egotistical ways when it comes to 8th house things, and this shows that any planet that's with that Mercury is going to be destabilized and even turned a little bit inauspicious due to the desire for the gains of the 11th house. What we see here, because you have to consider all of these, right? When we see that the dasha of any planet that is with the 3rd, 6th, and 11th lord, planets in those houses and planets with these lords are unfavorable. So this shows that Venus is being destabilized by the fact that it's with the 11th lord, Mercury. And when Jeffrey Wolf Green experiences the Venus Mahadasha, he's going to have to contend with the positive things, such as the fact that it's with the 5th lord, and the fact that it's being helped by Mercury and Jupiter through the yoga given here. Ultimately, we have to still consider that Venus is with the egotistical 11th lord, and there's going to be some damage that happens there. Venus is with Jupiter, which is a Marika lord, the lord of the 2nd house, and this also produces unfavorable effects. So these are all things that are telling us what's going to happen when Jeffrey Wolf Green is in the Venus Mahadasha. So if anybody's looking to unfold more from their Mahadasha, this is an important screen to look at, and you wouldn't know this just by the screens and things given in Kala by itself. So this is important stuff. Now, the dashas is something that you can click on and see, and is an important thing to be able to look at, like I said. And that's why I include it in my reports. Now, all of these just convey some important information. I could really go through each of them. Here we have the Yoga Judgment screen, shows the dignities in the Vargas, and it shows the Ishta Subha Digbala. We can see for Jeffrey Wolf Green, the moon, if the moon is in any yogas, it produces some positive results. We can see Mercury in any yoga, which it's really Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter are all in this fat yoga here. Mercury has the capacity to produce good results because the score is higher than the Kashta. The Jupiter has the ability to produce great yogas, and as well Venus has the ability to produce great yogas, although Venus also will bring some negativity as well. So the Ishta Subha Digbala figure is very important, as we know from Asheville Vedic Astrology. And we can see this kind of happening in Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart. Really, we could say that of all these, nothing really can convey a truly deep and powerful yoga. the Sun and Mars actually convey a stronger yoga because the Sun is the 10th lord and Mars is the first lord, but they don't have much strength in terms of that power. Venus and Mercury wouldn't create a Raj yoga. You know, most people look for Raj yogas, but really any of the yogas conveyed by any of these planets are going to be helped by Ishtasubha Digbala. So that's the yoga judgment screen. The next one we could look at is the Shodasha Varga. We could look it up and we could see all of the main 16 charts, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Oh yeah, so this is 15 charts here, plus the Rashi chart makes 16. And we could see all of them displayed here on one convenient page, which when you print it off, of course, it ends up being just that one convenient page. As we can see here. It's all right there on a physical piece of paper that you can look at, and so that you don't have to go to your Kala screen every time you want to look at that, right? I think that's huge, personally. So what else I use is Shadbala, and we can see here that it gives a nice convenient description of all the aspects of Shadbala. We have, as again, Ashtaka Vargas, the Ashtaka Varga charts, which show the power that transits can have in the different signs. We have Vimshotari, and this gives a one big page of all the Vimshotari dashas. We've also got Charanavamsha dashas, and we've got the nature of the house lords, as I've already described. And finally, we have dashas and planets, and these are the things that I would typically print. And this is 3 full pages of information on the dasha lord. If somebody wants to have a reading where I talk about the dashas, whatever dasha the person is in, I'm essentially going to circle the ones related to it. I'm going to circle these ones which relate to Venus. I'm going to circle this one which relates to Venus. I'm going to go through all the ones that show Venus and then speak to them. So it's very useful. Especially, as I said, having them as a physical chart. When a person asks me, I don't got to dig through Kala. I can even go to a person's house in the physical real world, and I don't need to have Kala on my laptop. I got it all right here. So let's go a little bit further and talk about where we would go from here. Before we finish, I do want to show that, like I said, the batch printing does not include the Lajatati Avashtas. I think this is something that Ernst simply is just still working on. So what I'll do is, this is just a little key thing that I've learned to do. I'll explain. I'm going to go to the Bhava Chalita cusps, and I'm just going to essentially print a page using the print screen function. So what you can do on the computer, you hold the Windows button and then you hit print screen, and a screenshot will be printed. Now what I do is I go to these screenshots and I come all the way down, and for this final screenshot at the bottom, I'm going to take this, I'm going to make a small little box that's going to contain, essentially I'm editing this in Paint, by the way, right? This is a screenshot here. I edit. It takes me to Paint, gives me this. I'm going to edit just this little square. And of course, each person is going to use different softwares maybe to sort of get these things figured out. So I print it and I remove some of this excess just to make it look pretty. So now what we have here is the Ishtasubha Digbala screen, just conveniently here with the Lajatati Avashtas, as well as the Bhava Chalita cusps in their signs, as well as the nakshatras that they fall into. So I'm going to save this, and where I'm going to save it is as that same folder that I just had all my other stuff in. When I go to Kala, I go to Jeff Wolf Green, and then I'm going to save it as 1C. So that way I know that when I go and look back at that folder with all that stuff, Jeffrey Wolf Green, I can see A, B, C. Now that screenshot is going to be here in Kala. Now usually what I'll do, just for the sake of it, because printing color is kind of an annoying thing and it's not always necessary, what I'll do is I will go to my filter, like, you know, this is a Microsoft sort of editing screen, and essentially what I do is remove the color and increase the clarity. So then I save that. So now it's in grayscale so that I can just print this off as it is, because it's useful to have the green and red lettering, but I don't always have colored ink in my printer. So now we can see here that we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And this is the typical chart that I would print if I was going to use a printer and print these functions. Now you have them here for your own purposes, for whatever reason you might want to use them. As well as you can look into these core yogas, and if you feel the need and if you want to include this in your physical hand-printed report, then you can. So once we have all of our PDFs that we know we're going to be able to use, what you want to do, I've got a different software on my other computer at home for merging PDFs, but essentially what we want to do next is merge all of these PDFs into one PDF file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go online, I'm going to look up combined PDFs, and the one I've found is smallpdf.com. I'm going to go to choose file, and what I'm going to do is right away, we know that I'm going to go to the same folder. I'm going to gather up all of these different A through J of my report that I actually want to print. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to merge these files into one convenient PDF, as we can see here. And of course, since I put them in alphabetical order, they're going to print in alphabetical order on one file. So next thing I'm going to do is download, save to this device. And what we can see here is what's going to be downloaded is this whole thing now has become one giant PDF, as we can see here. Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, 12, and 13. So now we all have it all as one convenient file. And of course, from here, we would go to print using Cute PDF Writer or whatever it is. And I usually like to make it so that I know this isn't my usual thing that I would use, but typically I would print it in a way that it is double-sided. So it's not just one page, one page, one page, so that you could actually have it as a double-sided report. And eventually, what you're going to get after you go through all of this is one printed report of all the PDF pages that you've printed. And as I said, I've made mine so that it's double-sided. So I use less paper, less of a bulky thing to have to deal with, right? Now, this is the nature of the great secret that I've tried to show you guys here today. Next thing I want to do as a big part of this video is I'm going to show you how I go through and work through making my own singular report code. This is the very Sagittarius moon thing that I was talking about. I mean, I keep saying that, but not that you need to be Sagittarian in order to dig this, but for me, half of this process is writing it out by hand and memorizing all of the important figures on the chart that we see here. And then number two, it's nice to have it all compiled in the front page of a report. And this is that front page is what I mainly use whenever I am going through a chart with a client. So let's take a look at how I would write out this report and this encoded front page.